Bernie Sanders decided he's not playing around anymore, and he's going to go for the jugular of some major corporations. Most importantly, Amazon. So take a look at this. Thousands of Amazon workers receive food stamps. Now Bernie Sanders wants the company to pay up. Senator Bernie Sanders will soon introduce legislation that would require large employers such as Amazon, Walmart, and McDonald's to fully cover the cost of food stamps, public housing, Medicaid, and other federal assistance received by their employees. The goal, he says, is to force corporations to pay a living wage and curb about $150 billion in taxpayer dollars that go to funding federal assistance programs for low-wage workers each year. The bill, which Sanders plans to introduce in the Senate on September 5th, would impose a 100% tax on government benefits received by workers at companies with 500 or more employees. For example, if an Amazon employee receives $300 in food stamps, Amazon would be taxed $300. At a time of massive wealth and income inequality, the gap between the very rich and everyone else continues to grow wider, Sanders said. So let me explain to you why this is brilliant. Now, if you propose an idea like a living wage, which Bernie has and other Democrats have in the Senate and in Congress. So you say, okay, we're going to do a living wage law. What happens? You immediately run into a brick wall known as Republicans and even some corporate Democrats say, no, we're not for a living wage. Okay, so that's a problem. Now, how do you do a workaround around that issue? Well, there is one way, and it's exactly what Bernie did here. So it's all in the framing. So left-wing framing is, hey, it's a moral issue to pay people a living wage. That's a no-brainer. So you frame it around morality. A right-wing framing on the issue of a living wage would go something like this. When corporations don't pay their workers a living wage, what ends up happening is those workers are then forced to make up the difference so they can live. And how do they make up that difference? Government assistance. So what we're going to do is force these corporations to pay a living wage. By now, we're going to say we're going to mandate that you pay back the government, aka the taxpayers, for the subsidies that your workers are getting that the taxpayers should not be on the hook for paying for. Why should taxpayers have to subsidize Amazon workers so that they can make a living wage when fucking Jeff Bezos is worth $155 billion? Hey, asshole, you can afford to pay a living wage on your own. You can afford to have your workers off of government assistance. So ultimately, the argument from Bernie Sanders is Jeff Bezos, McDonald's, the Walton family, you are all welfare queens. And I'm here to stand up for the taxpayers, and I'm here to say, I, Bernie Sanders, am against welfare queens. You are the welfare queen. So I'm going to stand up for taxpayers, which is an argument that appeals to Republicans because Republicans are like, man, I don't want big government, I want small government. So here's Bernie Sanders saying, great, let's shrink government. How are we going to shrink government? We're going to make it so that anytime public assistance is paid to workers who are working at corporations that can afford to pay them a living wage, we're going to make sure that we pay the taxpayers back when they had made up the difference between the wage they were earning and what would be a living wage. So, brilliant framing. I've seen Ro Khanna do similar framing to this at times where, so now you have a piece of legislation that's going to appeal to Democrats because it's like, oh, okay, living wage. We love that idea. We're going to force these corporations to pay their workers a living wage. But now it also could appeal to some Republicans because the argument is, oh, we want to help the taxpayers. You shouldn't have to pay for a worker who's at Amazon when Jeff Bezos has over $100 billion. That's crazy. So this is a pro-taxpayer piece of legislation, and it would shrink government. Brilliant. Now, here's the problem. What I just gave you was the theory of it all. So I gave you, okay, these are the theoretical arguments that would appeal to the left-wingers and the arguments that would appeal to the right-wingers. And moral framing for the left, for the right-wingers, you have to frame it around fiscal responsibility in order for it to work. But here's the problem. The theory that the politicians on the right say they believe in, they don't actually believe in it. So the framing works for average Joe Republicans who might hear that argument and go, oh yeah, that makes sense. Smaller government, Get them off public assistance. Love it. Let's do that. So average Joe Republicans will be like, I like that. Is that going to work with Republican politicians? No. Because ultimately, they don't have a principled belief in small government. Not at all. If they did, they wouldn't be for rampant NSA spying. You know, that's just one example, but the list goes on and on. They wouldn't be for endless war, which is giant government. They wouldn't be for Wall Street bailouts. They were all for Wall Street bailouts. So, or I should say most of them were. Some Tea Party types weren't. But, I mean, that's the problem is they say they're small government conservatives. In reality, the Republican Party, the politicians, are rampant corporatists. And part of corporatism we will subsidize the corporations. So we're pro-welfare as long as the welfare is for rich white guys in suits and ties who are CEOs. So it's not going to work. Unfortunately, even this brilliant framing is not going to work. So that's a shame. And by the way, Amazon had the nerve, and I do mean the nerve, to fire back against Bernie here. They released a statement, and they said something like, oh, the senator's claims are misleading and inaccurate. And Bernie responded and was basically like, are you kidding me? You really want to get into this argument with me? You're Amazon. You really want to get into this argument with me? Come on. You know I have the facts on my side, basically. And Bernie responded and broke it down issue by issue and said, hey, Amazon, here's exactly where you're wrong. Oh, you say your wages are competitive for the industry they're in. Did I say anything about competitive for the industry they're in? No, I said you're not paying them a living wage. You want to know why? Because you're not paying them a living wage. It's almost like, how dare you really step up and try to counter-argue this, you fucking fools. So, I think Bernie's brilliant for doing this proposal. I think it... And by the way, this is the reason why Bernie is the most liked politician in the country. Because average Joe Democrats, average Joe Republicans will look at this and go, oh, I like this. But the thing is, it's not going to work in Washington because there's so many bought and sold cretins who are just an arm of the corporations that donate to their campaigns. So I don't think this is going to work in terms of getting it implemented, but it's brilliant framing, and this is how you win a political argument. And the more Amazon tries to fight back, the more ridiculous they're going to look, and the better Bernie Sanders is going to get.